Live from Morocco. All right, this is a great one. So many takeaways to this conference. If you're doing a conference, going to a conference, this is the one, and a lot of great takeaways from your experience.
Yes. This is a podcast about my experience at Paradigms, Frontify's annual conference that changes location all over the world. I talk about how much I learned from actually the experience of the whole conference itself, from the design to the experience, blah, blah, blah. And then also talk about all the talks that I saw and all the inspiration that I got, and try to break down my favorite parts and the takeaways for brands and the takeaways for agencies. And there's a lot in here. It's a little bit long, so hope you enjoy. Let us know, comment, but very, very fun, and big thank you to Frontify for inviting me.
Yes. And there's something in here for everybody. I do think there's great takeaways for brands, for conferences, for individuals. A lot of really great takeaways. So enjoy.
Ciao.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in GoodCo, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Very special episode.
Hello
you
from
are
Morocco.
Marrakech.
I'm
Where
in
in the world?
Marrakech. Where in the world is Chris? And this is
Yes.
like becoming like kind of a ridiculous situation. But like I am in Marrakech, Morocco, and I was invited here by Paradigms, Frontify's conference. And yeah, got lots of feelings. Got a lot of things to say today.
I
It
am
was super fun.
excited to hear about it. And a little bit of background, because we don't do a lot of conferences, but we're really interested in the ones that do things quite differently. And so we'd heard a little bit when we were at Cannes, we heard about this conference.
Yeah,
I think
shout out to Jimmy. Jimmy is the number one guy telling. I told the Paradigm people they should be paying Jimmy a fee, because I met nearly 20 people at this conference who were there just because of this guy, Jimmy. So
Jimmy, you're the best. You're the best.
yes.
Yeah, and I think Lindsay from Sunday Dinner posted something about it. I just think it's seemingly kind of a special conference, because there's all of the general conferences, but always looking for something that's a little bit unique and different. So I'm really excited to kind of hear the breakdown and be in Marrakech virtually with you.
Yeah, and we'll come back and do some things.
I can't wait.
But yeah, I mean, I think maybe first, I'll introduce kind of what it is, and I'll give my version of it versus anything, tailored as always. But I will say they invited me here, but they didn't ask me to say anything. They basically were come, we'd love you to experience it. They haven't said I have to say anything nice about them. I'm going to say lots and lots of nice things about them, but not because they paid me to.
Right. And we were intrigued to start with. We were
thinking of going anyway. Yeah, but then we hadn't got ourselves organized, and then they were like, hey, would you like to come? And like you said, I don't really subscribe to the whole conference thing, but everybody had said it was amazing. And I will say, so anyway, it's run by Frontify, which if you don't know what Frontify is, this is not their boilerplate text, I'm sure.
No?
But it's sort of the back end for brands, especially brands with a really large
It's probably
scale,
not the tagline they use.
No, but it's
you need the back door. We're the.
If you're a brand using it, you know what it is. But if you're a designer, you've probably interacted with it. A bunch of our clients use it as a place for housing brand guidelines. And there was a lot of conversation around brands and consistency at scale. And it's really a tool for enormous brands that have, designers and agencies all over the world that they're trying to basically say, here's our brand, or here's our seasonal initiatives, or here's these things. And it houses it all in one place in a really organized fashion. They're Swiss. And so organization really makes sense for them, right? But I will say, having lived in Switzerland, so I think I could say this.
You can say this.
It's a much more fun company than you would realize. The founder, Roger, so cute, adorable, gave such a really great intro. The whole staff, I'm going to go on a whole rant about how well organized this conference was. And
really?
You are going to be shocked, because I never say anything as well.
No, you would definitely not. Yeah, that's not a go-to of yours unless it's fucking dialed.
It was dialed. It was so dialed. And
amazing.
The person that dialed it, Rebecca. Shout out to Rebecca at Frontify.
Love it.
if you are running a brand conference, you need yourself a Rebecca. This lady had, like, everyone was getting emails, but you, like, not in an annoying way. It was like, here's what you're doing this morning. Like, this is where you need to be. Make sure you have all of these things. Like, everything was just so well thought through, down to like the swag that you were getting. So I think the first half of this podcast really has to be dedicated to like how well organized and like all my favorite things about how they did the actual conference. And then we can get into like the speakers and the things that I learned.
Because that's pretty rare. Like we have a very high bar as far as production details, whether it's experiential, whether it's a conference, whatever it is. Like we have a very high bar, whether it's South by, Cannes, whatever it is. Like we definitely have a very high bar, having been in that world for many, many years.
Exactly.
So that's impressive to say, because typically you wouldn't notice that unless it was anyone really, really, really dialed in. So I'm really excited to hear that. That's great.
Exactly. I called it the antithesis of the South by Southwest London experience.
I mean, there's some opportunity there.
There was some opportunity, and they should get themselves a Rebecca. Obviously, a conference
Everyone needs
of
a Rebecca.
Completely different scale, right? There's only 200 people coming to this conference, or here in Morocco, there were only 200 people. So it's very intimate, but it didn't need to be as well organized as it was. Like it was really just like so dialed. So they hired so every year they hold the conference in a different location. So like this one was in Marrakech, last year was in Rome, the one before that was in Lisbon, and the one before that was in Barcelona. I think that's everything. And they sort of like, they change the venue every time, and they change the branding every time, which is really fun. The brand was done by Hayes Studios, which is out of Barcelona. And I have some art by Hayes Studios because obviously I went by this studio when I was in Barcelona. And the branding was really well done. Like so cool, like interesting motion graphics, just visually really cool. Like obviously drawing on Moroccan influences, but like it was really the details that got me. Like they had made like really cool arrows, and then they had screen printed them, or like somehow like done something where it was like applied to like urns, these Moroccan urns. So like when you were looking for places, like the signage was like on the side of an urn. Like it was everything about it was so really nicely done. And the team had these really cool t-shirts that didn't look like, there was no paradigm written on it. There was no Frontify written on it. It was just like a cool graphic t-shirt that they were all wearing with cute little white shorts. And like, it was just really incredibly well done in terms of like brand. Like it felt really nicely designed, but then like not in a cheesy way, like really good details. So
that's great. That seems particularly important for this conference, because I think this conference the audience is mainly agencies. Is that fair to say?
I think it's a mix.
Okay.
It's a mix of agencies that, like they bring in these cool like speakers. So, I'm going to talk about it, but like Eugene, like Huge Brandstrat, if you know him on TikTok.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody knows him. Tom Beckman, like, really interesting speakers. But it's agencies. And I would say like cool agencies, like not like the WP massive like agencies of the world, like cool boutique studios that like,
cool.
that are being hired probably by these larger agencies often as like, this is the typography studio that we're using to like design this type, or like there was a lot of sound people there, like who were doing sound like design. It was a lot of that. And then there's also like brand clients of Frontify that were either invited to speak, obviously, because they must be using the product like a lot. But they also had some cooler like, I met Victoria from the Oxford Dictionary, and like she was really rad, and like they use it, but like, interesting, like there was Skyscanner there was HSBC was there. So like some big global brands. And so it was that. Like it was kind of the mix. And like I think that mix was really interesting because they had to balance in the talks, like the talks for like the cool designers. And then these like bigger global brands that like have, quite honestly, like different needs and issues, right? And things that they're interested in learning about. And so I think they did a really nice job of like mixing together. And we can talk through some of the talks that I heard, but like I want to talk about kind of the overall like introductory experience before we get there.
Please.
but like it was like a good mix of kind of like, this is for them, this is for this. And for me, obviously, I love a bigger picture talk, so I probably resonated with those the best. But there was a lot of like in the weeds things that I did hear in the crowds, and you can see actually they use this thing called Slido, which was interesting to like have people live ask questions. Like, so when while the talks were going on, you could like go on and Slido and you could like literally like type in a question. And then at the end of each talk, almost every single talk, they had a Q&A where people could talk. And I will say that there was a lot more kind of like detailed questions for the detailed ones than I thought there would be. And I think that speaks to the fact that there were people there who were like, yeah, like this is useful for my day to day. It might not be as aspirationally interesting, but it's like productive and really like applicable. But okay, so the first thing first when you got there is that on the very first day, they offered 4 different experiences for people to decide on what to do. First was the hot air balloon, which I was too late. Apparently, like that ship sailed like the day that the conference like started. I will say, I'll post some pictures of it. It looked amazing. Like I want to come back and do that experience.
All right, next year.
Like,
Let's do it.
well, it's not going to be in Marrakech, but like we should come to Marrakech.
Yeah.
But it was like these huge baskets, and like it just looked phenomenal, and like sunrise over the desert, like crazy. But then there was quad biking, which I did do, and that was fun.
I hope we have pictures of this.
I do, but you know, it's quite difficult to take a selfie while actually riding a quad
not
bike
recommended.
with 40 other quad bikes like right on your butt. Like that's not really
not
like
recommended.
No, so I did do a little photography, but it's mostly like you can see like it's like here's like one cropped weird thing, like because I was not confident enough to be like out there. And it was my first time like really quad biking in the desert. So maybe next time. But that was really fun. And all of us got back and we were so sandy. But then there was actually showers there. So we showered, some of us. And then there was sound bath, which I heard was lovely and very relaxing. And then there was also gentle yoga. And they had cool branded. So each of those things, they also had swag for each of the activities. So they branded the yoga mats, which I have one in my bag.
And what's the branding?
Of the like, it's like the conference like visual identity.
Like, but so you'll
it doesn't even say. I don't even think it says Frontify on it. And that was like the whole thing. They had like this basically like a symbol, like an icon logo, and that was on things. But it's not like Frontify, like,
well done.
or even paradigms everywhere. And I think that was what made all the swag feel like, you're like, yeah, I totally would take this home. Like they had exercise bands because apparently in the yoga class they used like some exercise bands and those were branded. They gave us, for the quad bike people, they gave us like fanny packs so that we could actually put things in, because they were like you are going to be on this quad bike and you're going to want to have all your little bits and bobs, but like not everybody has a fanny pack. Of course I have many.
Or several.
Yeah, but I was happy to not get the ones I had super sandy. And they gave us gaiters and like, so they were just really thoughtful with the swag. And then
I love the array. Like the array of different, like quad bike is very different than sound bath. That's a different person.
And exactly. Like, and it seemed to me like no one's like, other than the people who were like, oh man, I would have totally loved to do a hot air balloon. But like nobody settled. Like it wasn't like, oh, I wish I could have gone on the quad bikes, but it was like, no, I just didn't want to do that. Like I wanted a more relaxing experience. And so a lot of people's first sound bath, like a lot of people have never heard of a sound bath. So that was really interesting to me because, obviously I'm a little bit of a sound bath fanatic.
Yeah. Wow.
And then of course I'm like giving all my favorite global sound baths to people and they're like, yeah, I liked it. I was like, here's a repertoire of like amazing sound baths you can go into. You have to go to the Double J store in Milan and go up and have a gong sound bath. I mean, I am that girl. But one thing was really cute was that instead of a lanyard, they had these bracelets, and apparently they do this every year so that you don't have, but not the bracelets like it was a beaded bracelet. So it was really cute, like beaded. Let me see if I have it in here.
And does it shows that you get into the conference? Is there like a status one or everybody has the same?
So here's my beaded bracelet. And look, because I was on the quad bike, there's a little quad bike charm. And then it had my initials. And then these numbers were my tent numbers.
Oh, adorable.
So that I could remember what room I was in, which like feels like that would be like your whole thing, because you can never remember what room you're in.
Never.
So I thought of you many, many times during this experience.
I love it. That's cool.
So yeah, it was cool. And I'll post pictures like in the Substack,
yes,
obviously.
I need to see pictures
and see like details and things like that. You're just gonna have to go to the Substack and like check those out, because this is all coming hot off the presses. I'm literally like in the heat of Morocco.
Right. But I'm really impressed so far just of how they set it up, because again, you don't have to do that as a conference, but the thoughtfulness, the realizing of the different tracks, like people may want different things at different times, and kind of the thoughtfulness behind the swag and the branding is pretty great.
Exactly. Like it just didn't need to be that well done, but because it was so well done, it made you really feel like quite connected to the experience. Like you felt really taken care of. Like I really felt like somebody had my best interests like in hand, you know, like it was like, okay, like we want you to walk away from this and think to yourself, like, this is the best conference you've ever been to.
But I think that that's a very specific, really important detail. And I think, you know, it's not measurable in a traditional ROI, but it makes a fucking difference. Like there is, and maybe this is part of the reason why we've heard about this conference. People talk about it in such a passionate way. Like, I think it's really interesting of how far they went to really just create the experience of it. It wasn't something like I was seeing on social or anything like that, but it was just something that you experienced being there. And clearly it makes a difference. Clearly there is an ROI, even if it's not, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the
measurable.
word of mouth, I think, speaks for itself. It's not just Jimmy that was like recommending people that Jimmy did, but it was really like a lot of people were there because they'd heard about it. Like I met this, I can't remember, I'll look up the name of the studio, but like
sorry
I met this
guys,
Belgian,
no one's.
Well, to be honest, like I met them at the after party, like, and almost had my dress set alight. So my brain wasn't like completely like, there were like candles. I'll tell you about the after party in a second. Anyway, we have to keep going. But like I met this Belgian couple, and they like couple the studio, and they had been recommended by their like one of their favorite copywriters. So it's like it is a thing that people seem to like really feel close to, and it was really interesting. So
amazing. Let's get into it.
All right. So the opening day one. So after day one, so we went quad biking, or you went sound bathing, whatever, and you were dropped off at day one. Oh, I will say the only negative piece of feedback: nowhere near enough caffeine for anybody there. Like the caffeine situation was really lacking. I have to give at least some criticism.
Yeah. We're here for the honest truth. Let's just be clear. We're here for the honest truth.
Yeah. So the first talk was given, and I won't go into like super detail on each one, but basically what I've tried to do is like highlight my like favorite takeaway from each of the talks, just to kind of give like, this was what I thought like friends and other people should know. So
Speed
the first
takeaways,
one was,
I love it.
Yeah. The first talk was by Tom Beckman, who runs Weber Shandwick. It's a PR agency. And it was funny because he called his talk "Lore is the New Core." And then like as soon as the talk starts, he's like, by the way, that's not the talk I'm going to give, basically. He's like, that's the talk that I knew would get me a talk. And it's not really the talk that I want to give. And he kind of hit on it at the end. And like some people were upset, but I thought it was quite funny.
Yeah, it is funny. And speaking, you know, that was a big section in the newsletter.
Exactly. So
Sunday.
like
so
Lore
it's
is
obviously
very,
hitting a point. And his
Lore
PR
is
agency
very
is clearly
in the ether, right? And so I think it was like, he knows that Lore is in the ether, and he knows that that's like what we want to talk about. And he does kind of hit on it towards the end. So basically like his whole like, you know, my biggest takeaway from the talk was that he was like, you have to be positioning like within like culture, like positioning in 2025 is defining your role in culture. That's like it. And that sounds really kind of obvious to you and I, maybe, because like that's what we do. But it felt like after I talked to people, like they were pretty inspired by this talk, and Eugene was also inspired by this talk. But one of the things that he said that I thought was really interesting was that he was talking about brands, and he was like, yeah, you know, like in the rebrands, like you have branding is just retrofitting to the time that you are living in. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with going through a rebrand. Like you have to go through rebrands, and you need to be branding for the moment that you're in, right? And like if you misunderstand what that moment is in culture, then you can actually have a very poorly performing rebrand. But if you really nail it, and I think this is what Gap is doing, and like, you know, I think it's like when you hit the cultural like moment with your brand and you bring your brand into this future place, then that's when it really sings. And like, he's like, that is your goal. If in 2025, your brand is like, that's what you need to do if you're rebranding. And he was saying that like also in this era, and this is again, nothing new for you and I, but he was saying like, I have this quote, like the brand, like today, like a brand is the business, is the entertainment arm of the business. Like that's what brand is. So you have like all of these other aspects of your brand, like making money and like the business side of things, right? But the brand, like with a capital B, like that is the entertainment wing of your business. And that is very much like, I think what you and I have been saying a lot. And I think that's where the kind of the lore is the new core. Like he was kind of trying to talk about like how, like he made this interesting kind of point. He was like, you know, I don't know if you know what Italian brain rot is, but we haven't talked much about Italian brain rot. But it was the word of the year in the Oxford English Press, whatever. I'm giving that a terrible name in Oxford Dictionary. But Italian brain rot was so viral on TikTok, and he went through all the different characters and everything. And he's like, that's bigger than Marvel. Like the views on that were bigger than Marvel has ever been in all of history. Like you could take all of the like Marvel views and they never end up like equating to like Italian brain rot characters that were popular on TikTok this year. And that's sort of what he was saying is like, this is the moment, right? And people want to be able, like the reason that people love those characters is that they have backstory after backstory after backstory that people have created, that like, you know, and the community has created it. And like, there's a lot to go on. And he was talking about how McDonald's is bringing back their characters now because they're realizing that like, you know, the Hamburglar has lore, and like that's what you want, like that's the entertainment factor. Today like entertainment comes with like this desire to like really dig in and to like create culture. And he was like, don't be parasitic on culture, like you need to create it and like add to it and be like have a point of view, try something. Ultimately like your job is entertainment.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's nothing new necessarily for us, but I think articulating that is super important. And then, of course, you know, my brain goes to like Jaguar versus the Gap.
Exactly.
All right, let's keep going.
All right. So next they had Tom Gilbert with Design Bridge and Jamie Lillywhite from HSBC. And like this was an example, they called it the pursuit of pixel perfection, which was quite funny because at one point, and this was not their fault at all, but like and this is the only time it happened during the entire event, but like literally the screen like lost pixels. So it was like really quite funny.
Did they enjoy the moment? Was there some like humor and vulnerability and
yeah, they made fun of it. Like
Great.
They just acknowledged it.
Here
and I
for
think
that.
that's like, yeah, I'm here for like breaking the third, like the fourth wall or whatever, and like kind of acknowledging it.
Whichever wall that is.
But like what they talked about, like I think this one is a good example of like, it's more for like the technical, like how do you do this, right? Like HSBC is an enormous global company. Like they work in like basically every market ever, right? Like huge. And he was talking about like how they zoomed out kind of one day and they, you know, they had brand guidelines like we all do. And he was like, but if you looked at the work that was being created globally, like you'd have no fucking idea that like that there was a brand guideline. Like it was like all over the place, like logos everywhere, but like used in different ways. So they did this whole rebrand. It took 3 years. I think nowadays you kind of have to roll these things out a little bit more fast. But again, like they did do that. Like they sort of have been doing that. Like, they rolled out the Carve rebrand. Like they're doing it in projects. But he talked about how, you know, like there needs to be global brand guidelines that need to be clear and simple. And that was a big like point that many people made is like a lot of rebrands are overly complicated, and brand teams all over the world, when they're in different markets and they have different contexts and they have different backgrounds, like they misinterpret them. And there's not enough effort put in like really making brand like guidelines that can be used. And it's great to like do a rebrand, but if it's only the agency that did the rebrand that can do the rebrand work, then it's not a good brand guidelines and it's not good rebrand. But the biggest thing that I thought, go Go ahead.
Just that's a really good point. We're, doing some consulting for a brand, and they had somebody do a rebrand for them. And I think there's two different things, and hopefully you're an expert at both of them if you're doing brands for clients. One is the actual work of the rebranding and really that design and digging into that and really understanding what the brand needs. And the other is making sure that it translates through the brand guidelines and making sure that the team or other agencies or whatever it might be can utilize those things. They're not the same thing.
They're very much not the same thing. And so that I think was like really like interesting point. Like, again, not rocket science, but like a lot of this stuff was not rocket science, but like really like shocking how many people struggle with it. But one thing that was super interesting that they did, so during this whole like rebrand, they instituted this thing called Living Wall. And I think it's run through Fig Jam, though he didn't specifically say. And essentially every week, the global brand teams, like anything that they've rolled out. So it's like, this is a big social campaign that we've launched in Asia, or here's an out of home thing that we did, or like here's a new homepage redesign that we did in the Middle East. Like, it's a really big global brand. They load it onto the Living Wall. And he was like, it took some time for people to like really value this. But then as a global brand, they were able to see everyone's work and see the visual patterns literally like visually. And they review the work as a whole. So instead of like looking at like, oh, is this good work or is this good work? It's like they're looking at all the work and they're able to kind of guide it. And very also interestingly, they have a new CEO who literally said, like, part of the goal of the brand going forward is that we want to elevate the brand and we want to put focus on brand, which is so interesting to hear these days because it used to be all like CFO driven. But he's realized that like a global brand perception matters to their quality perception, which matters to their stock price. And so they put a massive focus on it as a company. And now this Living Wall happened to already be in place, and it's become like the central thing to the success of the company. So I thought that was really interesting.
Love that. That's a rad takeaway. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah,
all
love
right.
that. Okay, keep us going.
Then we had James, the CEO of Koto, which, like, if you don't know Koto, like, Koto is an enormous agency that's not an enormous agency, like, it's not one of the, like, giants, but it's basically worked on everything that you could possibly, like, think of. Like, they've done stuff for Amazon, they've done, like, the Apple, like, I don't know if he worked on Apple, but he mentioned Apple a bunch of times. So, like, they've worked on, like, basically everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, so he starts off his talk, which also was in Tom's talk, with like a Nike stock price thing. And the Nike bashing that was happening at this conference, like, was fascinating. And essentially, my takeaway from the Nike bashing portion of it, that I think is important to touch on, was that they were using Nike as a parable for what happens when you don't continue to invest in brand, right? And that you lose yourself to kind of not doing that. The truth is that we all know that, like, a lot happened behind the scenes, like with their wholesale relationships and like how they threw those in the wind, and then they changed like suppliers and they moved from China to Vietnam. And like, I think there's a lot more behind the stock prices than like, oh, they stopped investing in brand. But everyone was really like enjoying, I think, showing that, like, if you don't invest in brand, like, people like On will steal your space. And one thing that James did was he literally showed like side by side campaigns that On has been doing, and was like, 5 years ago, here's a Nike campaign, and it's exactly the same campaign. And he was like, that shouldn't have happened, right? Like, that was sort of the essence of his talk, was that, like, consistency, like, and not in like a just being boring, same consistency, but like rigor and discipline as a brand, which Nike had before, where it was like, it was constantly creating these like enormously emotional, powerful, like, he talked about how before, like, the Nike that we know of, like, and you think of as Nike, they focused on their product. And then they made this massive shift where they were like, no, everyone's going to be an athlete, and we're going to empower like everybody. And that was sort of like the big change for Nike. That's when Nike became like the brand we know more knew. And he's like, the minute they stopped doing that, the minute they lost their discipline, then they lost everything. And so he was like talking about, he made like some examples, like some interesting, he's like, look at Nike's work now. They do running campaigns and they don't even use runners. They use models. And like, if you spend any time running, you would know that that's not how people run. And then he was using that as an example, like against this other brand called UVU, who are making very powerful campaigns for a fraction of the budget and are going viral, like, you know, like bringing all these runners in them, turning into an incredible movement because they are authentic and disciplined about their brand and like, and all of those things.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that they kind of the case is that Nike kind of lost their IP in what they were,
Exactly.
what they had created, and then also I would argue, like, you know, they're not keeping up with culture and the things that they are doing, and the other brands that are spending, you know, a third of it, actually, you know,
Yeah.
Nike budget's a tenth of it, 100th of it, are killing it.
Yeah. And he used the example of Oatly, and he was just like, you know, I don't think Oatly's brand is like, wow, this is incredible. But like, he's like, what they did do is that they were very disciplined, like with their voice, with their tone. Like, you always know it's them. It always feels right. It's uncopyable because like you own it so much that like if anyone were to copy it, you would know it was just a knockoff of Oatly. Right. And that
Right.
this discipline
Yes.
like leads you
Yes.
to becoming uncopyable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And then the last thing in the Q&A that I thought you would really like is that somebody asked him, like, I think it was one of the conference organizers' questions, but he was like, the brands that Koto makes are very optimistic. And he said they are very optimistic. And he believes that brands like have that place in culture and that they should be optimistic, and that people really need optimism. And you don't need to be like rah-rah optimists, but like people like optimism. And how they do that is that they hire optimists. And the reason that they hire optimists, and I thought this was really like interesting, is that he was like, brand projects, like getting a rebrand, like with a major company like Amazon over the line is literally the hardest thing in the world. Like there are so many revisions. There's so many like people like second guessing everything. There's so many people saying like one thing and then another thing and like then like going back to the beginning. And if you don't hire an optimist, they'll just give up. And
I love that.
he's like, that's
Love
the
that.
success of his agency, was that he hires people who like can't really believe that there wouldn't be like a successful thing at the end.
I love
And
that.
I thought that was cool. Then, and I will try to start speaking faster, but honestly, there were so many good things.
I know, but we got to keep it going.
Yeah. Okay. So Ruby Boddington, who is the senior creative at It's Nice That, and It's Nice That is like, you know, global like publication about like different kinds of like, they cover like creative in all different ways. Everybody knows what It's Nice That is if you're in this industry, I think. But one thing that was really interesting is they had been given the feedback, or Frontify had been given the feedback, that like when they go to these places, it would be really nice to have some of the speakers like be from these places, right? Like the places that we are. So like if it's like in Lisbon, there weren't maybe not enough people from Lisbon or Portugal like represented in the speaker lineup. And they were there as attendees, but they weren't necessarily there as like the people educating everybody else. So what they asked Ruby to do, because Ruby has access to kind of all of these really cool creatives all over the world that she curates, is that she curated 4 different speakers. And so there were there was 3 talks. One was a duo, and then there were 2 individual ones that were all people from Africa. So there was, I'm really not going to be able to say their names properly, but there was this team from Blackpepper Studio who are really incredible. They're half based in London and Lagos. And then I think she just moved to Toronto. So there's like a Toronto office too. But they gave a really interesting talk on, so they design with a lot of African brands, right? And their talk was on like heritage and like how do you handle heritage. And I thought it was really nice talk because it was like not like all the like, you know, luxury heritage brands, it was like real heritage of like African culture and like, and speaking, and I thought the like lessons were applicable to everything. And the line that I really liked was that they were like, heritage is a living, breathing thing. Like that's like heritage didn't like start as heritage. It's the thing that you've carried like, and it's morphed and it's changed over time. Like it changes, and that's okay. And they talked about the way like that they do a lot of research, and they showed sort of like this is how we were really thoughtful, and this is how we brought in heritage, but it doesn't necessarily look like a historic brand, and it doesn't need to look like a historic brand. It needs to have the references and the like homage, but it doesn't need to be old. Like, and nor does it need to stay the same. Like, it's okay that it comes into this moment and leaves this moment and becomes something else in the next moment, and that's fine. And I thought that
That's
was
really
really, really
powerful.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, really powerful. I love so many things about that. I love the fact that she was given direction, permission, ability to kind of go and curate these things. And then the fact that she really curated, like, how thoughtful is that? Because there's such a different perspective if you're talking about African heritage, if you're talking about, versus like, oh, well, we're a suitcase brand that's been around for, thousands of years, like hundreds of years, I guess, maybe not thousands of years. And there's just such a different play there. One's trying to make sure we don't lose our confidence. We don't, do this, do that. And the other one is just honestly and authentically, I'm going to use that word, and I think it's a fair place to use it. Actually bringing in what is truly the heritage of it and not worrying about, oh, does it feel heritage enough? Does it feel like we have enough confidence? It's just doing it in the way that one does it. And that's pretty rad.
Yeah. And so her partner in the agency, he is like the website of their business. So they do a lot of websites, and they designed Joshua Kissie's website, which I do really, really love. So
that says it.
Well done to them. Yeah.
Right.
And then Marwan, who is the author of, he's actually like a book designer, and he's worked with like all of the major book companies in the world, and he's designed like Rihanna's book, and he designed all of these amazing books. And he talked about his talk was about like, are books and is book design really important, and is it really brand? And he talked a lot about like how when he had to design Rihanna's book, like he was sort of like showing another side of her, and in essence, he was building a brand for a really side of Rihanna that we've never really seen. But he's also the author of his own book called The Queer Arab Glossary, and he was talking about, he's a queer man living in an Arabic, like in Arabic lands, and that's like quite like, what does that mean? And there's a lot of assumptions, and there's a lot of words that queer people are called, positive and negative. And what he did was he created all of these illustrations that put like a kind of a graphic or story to these words, and in essence, like allowed people to like claim the words and like use them and feel them, and like not have them be whispers anymore. And that was my takeaway. And he had this really beautiful line where he said, books are like songs, and they're capable of creating entire universes. And I was like, oh. And he was just so charming. And like, and the last thing that he said is like, anytime, and I think this is a great takeaway, anything that you do, like, you should be taking your audience seriously. You might not think that like queer, like Arab glossary is like the thing, but he took that audience incredibly seriously and brought something to life for a really niche audience, and to them it was very powerful, and that's what's made his book successful. And it's beautiful. Incredibly cool, and I'm going to link to it. So anyone can buy it.
I want to. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And then there was Mina, who is like he runs a studio out of Egypt. I will also link to it. I actually ran into one of his prints in a like store today in Marrakech, and of course I bought it.
Great.
But he was talking about how, and I think this was applicable to a lot of people, like, so a lot of brands in that room like are working in Arab markets, they're working in Asian cultures. And a lot of times the teams are not necessarily like the teams are not from there. Like they might have some people on the ground there, but like those people might not even be involved in the like gigantic brand, right? And so he's a small studio, like, that he was talking about Arabic typography and like bringing the Arabic language like into typography. And he was saying like, actually, like Arabic language is like different in every single culture. So like globally, like there's not even one unified like way of writing. Like how one culture writes, like they might have like lines that go back on each other, and like and then in another culture it's completely different. And so he hires calligraphers who are incredibly like skilled artisans in the art of typography, in order to like make sure that like when he is doing like fun and creative things with Arabic typography, that it's coming from like a heritage. But then when you look at the prints, like you'll see them, they're incredibly modern, like incredibly cool graphics. Like there's nothing heritage about them in like the sort of classic, like, oh, it's heritage kind of like, but it's also informed and like really thought through. And he was talking about how there's no italics in Arabic language. So like this is like, he does a lot of work where it's like half of the poster or half of the brand needs to be in English and half the, or French, or at least in Latin, like text. And like you might use slanted text and you want to like have it mirrored in Arabic, but like there's no such thing. And like how do you kind of like create these like mesh of these two things? And like it was a really beautiful talk, like super inspiring, one of my favorites. Just really powerful. All right, I'm getting to the second day soon, but the next talk was actually the like German arm of like PayPal, and then another company that Klein and Zeigen, which are like is payment. It's a German company, but like anyway, doesn't matter. And then their studio, Burkhard was the like leader of the studio, and Burkhard, who's a man, stepped aside and said, "I'm just going to let this woman, who really is like the lead behind this, who is my client, I'm just going to sit over here and I'm going to let her talk." And I was like, "Yay!"
Wow.
And
Did he get
was,
like a whole standing?
he did get us like
That's
basically a
great.
standing ovation.
That's exactly what should be happening. I love that.
Yeah, and she gave a really interesting talk, and like it was about like how these two companies used to be owned by eBay, and then eBay sold them, and then they sort of realized they needed a brand because they'd never really like had a brand because they were just kind of under eBay. And her like specialty is like go to market plans, and like I won't get into kind of all of it, and I'll show you, like I'll add some pictures to the Substack. But like one of the things she talked about was like they did this global rebrand, and what they realized was that, like, you know, in the build up, like they were going to do something pretty radically different than they'd ever done before. And they knew that there might be like this kind of like, there's like a traditional dip apparently during a rebrand where like everybody hates it. And it's going to happen. And what they did was for the 2 weeks leading up, they just focused on like kind of the brand colors and the logo and introducing kind of like, this is coming, like a new thing is coming. And what her thinking behind it was, and is that like everybody hates something new when they initially see it. So let's not try to like say the message and like give the big campaign away and like try to get everybody on board on that first day. Let's like introduce them to the rebrand and just like color and logo and kind of like, you know, something is coming. Do that for 2 weeks, and then we can come out with like our big like ta-da thing.
That's interesting.
And they inverted the bump, so they actually went up, and then they went actually down, but then they went up again. But it was just like she talked a lot about kind of that. And then the other takeaway that I had, which was not really like part of her talk, but it was part of the Q&A, was that this rebrand like got them tons and tons of press, right? And they did really well. And she's like been on a speaking tour about it and doing all of the stuff. And what Burkhart was saying that he didn't realize as an agency was that Iskra, I think that's her name. So Iskra like said basically like, I'm going to publicize this rebrand. Like I'm going to make people know about it. And so she went out there and she like got on the speaking path and she like gave keynotes and she like really put herself out there. And like that 100% led to like all the notoriety. It was just her saying like she had to do it. And now when he gets asked, because as you do from an agency perspective, like how do I make my rebrand like actually anyone care about it? He was like, so much of it is on you saying like, yeah, I'm going to go promote it on the circuit. I'm going to put the effort in, and I can't just expect that a rebrand is going to get like buzz because no one fucking cares. Like you have to make people care, and you have to go out there. And what she said was interesting about it is that because she was talking about it and she's going out and she's giving all these keynotes, this tiny little German brand that no one really knows about, when she wanted to do a collaboration, like she picked up the phone to like a big company. I don't even know if I wrote it down, but she was like, they picked up the phone because they knew about her and they had seen her on the circuit and they were willing to collaborate with her. And they wanted like this tiny little brand had actually like quite a lot of clout.
I love that. I love that she was so passionate about it.
Yeah. And she did a really good job. Yeah. Then there was a
Cool.
Spotify one. They have an in-house typographer who, like, she was even herself, like Bianca, like acknowledging quite rare. But she was saying that, like, you know, so much about what they do is like, it's important that things are legible. And so like her job, and it was a very, very technical talk. But one of the things at the end of it that she did was that she talked about like a big reason for like why she puts so much effort into like the details of typography that like maybe you and I might not see, like the counter inside the C is like wider in this font than it is in this font, and like why it's important that like it's wider here and not there. And she was talking about like she showed like a visual progression of like somebody from 50 to 80 and like their how their eyes change. And she was like, I
Oh, I bet.
don't want right. And she's like, I acknowledge that I'm at the beginning of this path, but when I get to the end, like I want to be able to enjoy the same things that I enjoyed when my eyes were really good at 40. And she gave this really like cool visual progression and like showed why like you might just think that some of these things for a design like are just for fun, but like they're actually quite important.
Yeah,
And so
I
I
dig
thought
that.
that was really cool.
Yeah, it goes back to the intention and the, you know, the intention of your audience and, you know, the respect of your audience.
Totally. And then there was this amazing dinner. They whisked us off into the middle of like
Great.
nowhere. I have no idea where I went. Massive, giant U dining table, like, and tagines coming from everywhere. And it was just so
Amazing.
fun. And I sat next to like this amazing group of people. I sat next to this very cool agency called After Hours. They make very cool brands from Australia and like really edgy, like kind of work, but like really good. And I sat across from this guy Tom from Native Instruments, who is like a brand there, and like just really like so much inspiration. Like it was just like everywhere.
Love
Like,
this. I love this.
all right. And then day 2,
Great.
I will try to get there. Day 2, Eugene opened. So Eugene Healey, who everybody knows is huge brand strat on TikTok. He has like almost like 500,000 followers. Gave a talk on what happens when a person becomes a brand, and he talked a lot about his personal story and how he's now himself a brand, right? And so that was interesting, I think, to everyone there because you know, he was talking about sort of the evolution of like working, right? And like how nowadays, like having a personal brand, like I relate to this, like it does incredible things for your career, right? Like, and you can have those personal brands inside of a big agency or inside of a big company, and like how companies nowadays are like really like actually looking for it. Like, there's a job, like I think it was for PayPal's like content creator on behalf of the CEO, and you're making like $200,000. It shows you like what
Great.
nowadays the investment, like the personal brand of a company's CEO matters as much as like that is an investment that they're willing to make. And that CEO is probably leaving in 5 years, but they're willing to invest in their CEO's personal brand because it makes such a big difference to their brand as a brand. So he was talking about how like that is so different, and how nowadays like you used to build in stealth mode, and like how nobody would talk about what they were building in Silicon Valley. And nowadays, like, it's like, I'm building it in public, and you're like literally seeing like the whole, like, you know, the sausage getting made of like, and nobody builds in secret anymore. And everybody's like telling you that something is coming. He sort of brought it, like, he wove it in a really incredible way. And quite honestly, like, I would probably just try to find his TikTok on it so that I don't have to like summarize like a really great talk. But like, because it was one of the best. Like it was really inspiring. But he also talked about something very practical for brands. And he was like, you know, the truth is we like are all judging like kids these days for like wanting to be creators, but like maybe we should be judging ourselves with like why we're here in the first place. And the other thing is that like so many companies these days are really not using their employees enough to like, a lot of employees in your company want to be creating a personal brand, and you can be tapping into that. And like he called it like the libidinal energy of your employees, and I thought that was like so funny. You had to be there for the context of that statement. But he was talking about like how, for example, like Ulta has decided that they're going to create an ambassador program within their company, and they've done it in a really powerful way. They do, anyone who signs up for it as an employee, like they make two posts a month. If they make the posts on like company time, they're paid for it. If they make it on their personal time, they're also paid for that content. They get special education, they get special products, they get experiences.
So smart.
They invest in these employee creators, and like, guess what? it's like changed the game for them on social. It's changed the game for them in terms of brand perception. And he said, like, you know, letting go of your brand, quote unquote, is very scary. But the truth is, like, you've already lost control. Like, that control is not
in
there
your head
anymore. Yeah, it's completely in your head. And like the more we invest lower and lower and lower in your org and let go, the better you're going to do.
That's a great takeaway for big brands. What are the creators that you're creating in your company? How are you leveraging that? Because they're there in every big company.
And I even saw the fear at the conference. Like, I was talking to a studio and they're like, oh yeah, like some of our employees like and freelancers like want, and they're doing it on company time and they're talking. And I was just like, and like, you know, but I think there's so much fear, but the truth is like, you gotta let go. You gotta let go.
That's a whole talk and breakdown of its own, which we should actually do, because I think that's happening. I think those two things are coming more and more of like, this is happening and this is an opportunity and people need to unleash. And you and I talk a lot about just the social portion, and really interested to see kind of those people really get into high levels. And then there is just this ever growing fear of like, my brand, it's got to be this, you know, and feeling like you have, which I think is a pretty fictitious idea around actually having control of it. But save that for another time when we're not over.
Yeah, we need to get into that. But then they had Carla and Ross, who were like heads of design at Skyscanner, which if you don't know Skyscanner, it's kind of like booking.com in Europe. Like they do, like, I use them all the time to like find affordable flights. I'm actually quite a big fan of Skyscanner, and I'm quite regret not finding them to tell them that I actually use the product a lot.
Okay. Fangirl. Okay.
So if you're listening to this, I do use it all the time. But they talked a lot about different things, and they also talked about how they'd done this really big rebrand with this agency, and then ultimately like looked to the work that was being created and like they were like, this work is shit. So they like basically like did this thing where they were like, it's not that we want all the work to be the same. We want to simplify it so that when you do something, you know what you're doing and you can play and do different things. And like they talked a lot about how, like, you know, it's not necessarily like a static brand. It can have play to it, but it needs to start from a place of simplicity so that like you understand like the rules, and then you understand where you're breaking the rules is kind of like what I took away from it. And they ended with like, they did all this stuff and then they had this opportunity. They're not very well known in the US, but they wanted to do something during the NBA
playoffs.
Yeah. And so they did this. So apparently like everybody says, this is going to speak to how little I know about basketball, but like they say like, oh, you're going to Cancun. I guess that's when you get eliminated from the playoffs, like the team goes to Cancun. So they're like, send them to Cancun as something that's like in the ether and culture. And so they made this like play on it where they like put this billboard across from the stadium and it said like Dallas to Cancun, like, you know, making fun of the like team that was like one of the team who's going to Cancun, you know, who's going from Dallas to Cancun. And it went viral there. And it was just a clever thing. And the 2 points of it was like, hey, they tapped into something that people were already doing. And then they found a way to like leverage that with their brand that really made sense. And then the last thing that he said was like, we would not have been able to do that because they made this billboard in 48 hours. And like they did it and it was very quick. And like they did a media buy and it was like they were able to move very quickly on this idea that they'd had. And he was like, we would never have been able to move that quickly had we not had a very simple brand to execute. Because we would have spent ages trying to figure out the campaign.
That's pretty rad. I love what you were saying, just that they're able to look at the work and not have like Emperor's New Clothes and be able to like look at it with perspective and be like, this is shit or this isn't working or whatever it is, after I'm sure they invest a lot of money and a lot of time in that. And I think that's pretty brave to be able to do that. Doing the work that they did, it sounds like it tapped into the things, right? It tapped into like being brave, culturally relevant, and timely. Yeah. And it hit.
All the things. So I thought it was like just
love that.
A really good example of like some things that we already know. And then here's an actual like case study where you can see that.
Yes.
Like, that happens.
Yes. Here for that.
Very rare. And then there was Jonas, who is like the head behind Builders Club. Everybody who was talking to was like, I know every single one of the ads this Builders Club is like a motion graphics, like video agency that works with a lot of other agencies, but they've worked with like everyone from Nike to Apple to OpenAI. Like they've done a lot of different things. And like basically every ad he showed, I was like, I've referenced that ad, I've referenced that ad. Like it was just like they really like do a lot of ads. But his point of his talk, I thought was really interesting, was about AI and how there's so much fear, especially in the world of like motion graphics and animation and agencies in general, of like, oh, AI is going to take your job. And he was like, here's the thing, guys, like everybody thought the printing press was going to take and then the photographers, like photography, right. Like, and then CGI. And he's like, AI is a tool. And we use AI. I mean, it was interesting. Like they gave the example of like how they worked on OpenAI's thing. And he was like, yeah, so at first we were like, okay, we'll do it all on AI. And then he was like, actually, like that doesn't work. And like, it's not for that. He's like, first, it always has to come from an idea. Like AI is super generative and it's pulling off everyone else's ideas. And he's like, if you ever thought that any brand was ever going to be successful off of anyone else's ideas, then you're crazy. So it has to come from an original idea. Then they put it through AI to like think about the idea and like test some things. And then he was like, ultimately, it looked like shit when we made it in AI. So then we used CGI and then we used graphic design. And then we and he was just kind of talking like, you can't spend your time fearing this thing. You have to spend your time having very good ideas and using these things as tools. And the people that view AI as a tool and who are investing in having great ideas, and great ideas comes from diverse influences and doing lots of cool things in your life and like being brave and all the things like having quirky ideas and pitching them anyway, those people are going to win because everybody's going to use AI. And like those people are going to win and the rest of you are going to not win.
Yeah. Fear is never going to drive anything.
He didn't say it that way.
Fear does not drive innovation. I love it. Yes.
Yeah. Then there was Nicola from Condé Nast, and she talked about like kind of a similar thing, like brands, how to scale a brand and not lose its soul. And she heads up like all the kind of digital brands for all of the Condé Nast things. So like basically like if you've seen it on mobile, if you've seen it on web, Nicola is behind it. And they won an award for the New Yorker website. And like, so she gave a very eloquent talk and it went through a lot of different things. But she was talking about like how at one point they were looking kind of at the New Yorker and they were like, oh, the magazine is so iconic. Like the covers are so iconic. Like even the illustrations on it don't even necessarily relate to like what's inside it. But like you just like, that's what you picture when you picture the New Yorker. And then you went on the New Yorker's website and it was just like, well, like, ordinary. And she was like, the truth is when you have so many things, you need to have a lot of rules. And so she was talking about like scaling brands. So you don't scale brands through documentation, you scale them through people. And this people are the stewards of the brands. And that's where the soul comes in. So she's like, you need to have a lot of documentation of like, these are the brand guidelines and da-da-da-da. But like, it's really like the people's job is to like steward the brand and is this right for the brand? And she was like brand guidelines would have told you that the New Yorker should be very cut and dry because it like loads really well and you want a publication to be fast and but like that's not the essence of what the New Yorker is. And that's where you need to bring in the stewardness to a brand where you like have to steward it towards like fitting within the brand guidelines and being right for the internet and not having everything load slowly and like all the rules, but having it still have its essence and its soul.
Love that.
Yeah, really liked it.
Agree with that for sure.
Then there was New, who would have been your favorite person at the conference.
Okay, here for this.
New wore like an incredible outfit that he bought from Funky Cool Medina here, which I went to, which is like a cool vintage shop in Medina. And he was just so rad. And I could not even try to summarize his talk. Like he talked a lot about a lot of things and he's like a man that's had like many careers and many like things and he was just so inspiring. Like I feel like that's like the essence of like the takeaway is like go figure out how to be new, because New was like everybody at the conference was like, who was your favorite person? Everyone said New. Everybody.
All right, we'll include links because now obviously I have to.
Yeah, he was just like a really rad person that he like. One of the things he talked about was that the world of design has taught you that you're like have to be a graphic designer or like, an architect. And like, these are the people who are designers, but it really like removes like a much bigger, broader group of people who are designing the world, like who are he was like, like doulas design like an experience for you, like, and they're designers in some like capacity, and like how we can't like keep like just assuming that like design, like he's like design is much bigger and broader. And he's like, you need to move from like selling stuff into solving things, and that's what designers do. We solve things. And he also has a publication called Deem, and he called it a tri-annual publication, as in we try to get it out, and I laughed my ass off. But it's really interesting. It goes into this topic, and he features people that are like not designers, but who are designing the world. And he was just incredibly passionate speaker, very philosophical. If you want a good talk at your conference, go hire Nast. That's my takeaway. Then there was, this name is Welsh, so who that knows, and Dan Brookwood with a like closing talk. And they used to work at Nike. And so it was interesting, like there was so much Nike bashing. And they said that they weren't going to be Nike. They used to be at Nike. And so apparently when you work at Nike, you can't talk about Nike, right? But then like they had left and they were talking about work that they had done in the past. And they were like, we're not going to be talking shit about Nike. They mostly talk shit about Nike. It was just like very politely talking shit about Nike. But like they, mainly because they were just like, they're really old school, and like everything that you think is organized within Nike is actually just a complete chaotic shit show. And
it's a matrix for sure.
We kind of all knew that. But they did the like, so when they came in, they didn't really have like a global brand guideline at Nike, because it was like all these different departments, and like the shoes were different, the people using all the things. So they worked on One Nike, which is like the global thing. And then they also worked on Nike Journal, which is their publication arm. And the interesting thing that I took away from that was that they like got into the journal thing, and they wanted to write content. Again, at the end of the day, like brands are in service of entertainment now. And like you're on the entertainment business, which is what I've been saying. And they were saying that like Nike has invested so much more into this, and they created 400 campaigns like in like the space of a year, like for the journal, and they worked with like small photographers, and in comparison to the budget of like a big campaign, like these stories were nothing, and yet they created so many of them, and then they showed how actually all these stories actually drove membership. And maybe it wasn't even the campaigns that were driving membership, it was really these like more true and honest stories, and like showing like different communities and things, and the really like authentic side of Nike. And so I thought that was kind of my big inspiration, was that like these smaller stories that you tell like actually do drive brand sales. So like don't do that. Do not do that. And then it was the end of the conference. They moved us to the desert. We stayed at this like crazy desert hotel called Le Bedouin. There were 4 pools. It looked like a Heineken commercial when I arrived. There were so many people in one pool drinking Heineken. This was like your moment.
Shit.
This was totally like, this was the moment that you were waiting for. So they had the after party, then they moved us to dinner, which was in another section of the hotel. Then after that, we moved to another after party, which was in a different area of the hotel. Then there was the after party, which was in another area of the hotel. And each time we were joking, like we could have all just stayed in one spot, but it was like a cool, like kind of experience to like move to all these different pools. And it did make me hang on until like about 1 a.m. Sounds like some, that's quite late for me.
It's quite late. I'm impressed. Very.
Yeah. But it sounds like some people were out, maybe the younger ones, until 5 a.m. and jumping in the pool. And you would have 100% been there.
100.
So, yeah, it was really cool. I met a lot of amazing agencies. And then since then, I've been staying at like this really cool hotel, like design hotel that I'll write about, and I'll try to put in the newsletter and all my thoughts, obviously, on everything. But like, yeah, really cool, really inspiring. Glad I went. Would definitely go again.
Great.
And lots of conferences and brands can learn from this experience.
Yeah, it sounds like there is a lot here. Would love to hear comments, what you thought of this conference, if you were there, other things that you experienced, and then other conferences that we should go and check out, or that if you're the conference itself, want to invite us to. Would love to hear.
Or should we make our own version of this? Because I was totally the whole time like being like, I need, like, if I were going to do a conference, this is now my inspiration, which is quite a compliment.
Not off the table. Not off the table. All right. I got to get to Breakfast Club.
Or go Breakfast Club it up and tell everyone I say hi.
Okay, I will. Stay curious, everyone. Let us know.
Ciao.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.